here, and I'm just going to ask you a couple of things about this before we open it up to the audience for some questions. I want to talk with you about WikiLeaks, because I can argue both sides of this, and I assume you can too. So let's go ahead and let's say, okay, what's the upside of having all of these secrets out there for the world to see, pretty much untethered to anything. I mean, we've got a few major news operations that have access to this information, and then they just put it out there for the world to see. What's the upside of that?
Well, there are two things happening. There are the New York Times and other publications who are actually looking at this glob of information and choosing, vetting, fact-checking, and choosing what they're airing.
Yeah, they aren't just dumping this out there.
But,
right.
You know, the complaints have been about what WikiLeaks did originally, which was just dump all the data out there.
Right.
And the big discussion has been, is that journalism? And within the society, there's huge disagreement about this.
Right.
There are those who say, hey, if you're not fact-checking it, if you're not doing the things that are in our code of ethics and, you know, confirming, etc., minimizing harm, then that's not journalism. But if you listen to Julian Assange, did you guys see the 60 Minutes interview that he did, or any of the other? He's done quite a few. He absolutely 100% considers himself a journalist. There is no question in his mind that he is exposing information to new audiences. And if you go to WikiLeaks' website, there are words saying that they are fact-checking and minimizing harm. They spell it the British way with the S instead of the Z, but they still say that they do it. So, and I'm not there, so I don't know what kind of fact-checking they did. But I do believe, the one quibble that I will have is, I believe the initial dump of information, the one that goes back now a year and a half, I don't know that they vetted as well. And
where they named names and informants' identities and things like that.
Yes. And I don't know that at that time that they minimized harm so much. But I believe that in subsequent releases that they did withhold information. My whole take on this is that I don't choose to define who is a journalist. People have tried for years. In fact, the government, our own government, wants us to define it. So in the federal shield law argument, that was the whole thing. Who is a journalist? Who is this going to apply to?
We, as journalists, though, and as journalism organizations, we have historically resisted defining who is and who isn't.
And of all times now, I think we need to resist it, because as the media changes, as these new tools come up and new people come into presenting information to the public, are they journalists or aren't they journalists? I don't know, and I'm not going to try to define. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to engage every single person who is disseminating information, whether it's Julian Assange or a blogger at home or someone working at a television station or someone in J school. Everybody, I want you to learn the best practices of journalism. I'm not going to try to define you whether you are a journalist, because then I'll just get into an argument, even within the Society of Professional Journalists, because there are people who right now do not believe bloggers are journalists, and they will argue to the death. And then there are people in this room who will say, what are you talking about? There are bloggers who have exposed brand new information that didn't appear in the mainstream media, and isn't that journalism? So how are you ever going to win that argument? That's why I refuse to engage in that argument. I'm not going to say whether WikiLeaks was journalism or wasn't journalism. In my viewpoint, they did bring new information to the public, which was not previously exposed. That, to me, is a journalism. Did they do it responsibly? Well, then we can have a different, discussion. I think sometimes they may have, and sometimes they may not have.
So is that the downside? Let me ask you, the
Yes.
downside of WikiLeaks is that sometimes it struck you as irresponsible?
Yes, I believe that the first releases were not vetted properly. And I believe potentially people I don't know that anything was ever proven of one particular life, but I think they certainly endangered lives.
Actually, it raised, I think, just an age-old question about using information that is leaked to any reporter, and it's been this way from the beginning of reporting, is that whoever is leaking stuff to you always has an agenda.
Absolutely.
And so why not?
Motivation.
Yeah, exactly.
Anytime you do a story, anytime you talk to anyone, you have to constantly be thinking, what is the motivation of this person to reach out to me? Just this week, I had somebody reach out with what could be a really, really good story that I'm going to start working on after
What is the story?
main book. I am not telling you.
Oh, come on.
exactly.
It's
But
just us.
It involves a medical device, I will not name, that a certain insurance company has green-lighted to cover under the federal contracts, but on personal contracts is denying, and it is a life-saving new gadget. Well, it's been around for 5 years, but that's still relatively new. So they're calling it experimental if people are trying to access it through their own insurance plans, but they're saying it's approved if it's through the federal contract.
That's interesting.
But the bottom line of it is the person who reached out to me is the gadget maker's PR firm, right?
How convenient.
Yes. Well, there's no way. I'm just putting out a story. I mean, so right away you know the motivate. I mean, when she originally reached out, she did not say who she worked for. That was my first question. Why are you telling me about this?
Mhm.
Who are you? And she told me who she was. So now I have to start from scratch. I'm not taking what she's got. So
Right.
now I'm looking for the journal articles, the American
Right.
Medical Association articles about this. Now I'm going and finding the patients. I'm going and finding the doctors. I have to start over. But so the motivation of this person obviously is to advance this particular product that she's selling. That doesn't mean it's not a story,
Yeah.
but I can't tell it through her. So motivation is in everything. I mean, every story you do, somebody's got motivation. City council, the city council
Sure.
member wants to be reelected. I mean, it's on and on.
But you just showed part of what should be in everybody's skill set, of course, which is skepticism.
Yeah.
And that's not just the storytelling, but wondering about the information where it comes from and why.
It's not necessarily great in your personal relationships, but it works professionally quite.
Yeah, nobody's smart enough though to separate those, are they? All right. So, what do you want to know from Hagit? We've got we've got a few minutes to. I've had this private conversation with her. Now it's time for you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Mary Fallon.
Hi.
I'm in San Jose. I was wondering about your initial internet and Skype access in a disaster. I would think that if you're closer to a disaster, the harder it is to get the information out, regardless if you're using the latest and greatest technology. So, was that a problem for you to get access, or for a problem for the journalists that are closer to the scene?
To get access to the actual people to interview?
To the
Or
internet.
to get internet access.
You're
You
having
know-
problems with it now, so.
Yeah, I'm having more problems here than I had there.
May we never have a disaster at Humphreys.
Exactly. I had the BlackBerry I had, which was an international phone. It was not really this one, I have to say. Before I left, I went and got the very latest world phone and loaded it up, and it never ever faltered, not once. And I had 2 batteries that I brought for it. We had rolling blackouts 6 hours at a time, but that still presented plenty of time to power everything up, even the netbook that I had. So I never had an issue with transmission, not once. Yeah.
Good. Good. Yes. Uh-huh.
My name is Jana Braun. I'm a journalism instructor here at San Diego Mesa College, one of the local community colleges here. And I was just wondering, the other day I saw this article posted on the Daily Beast about a study that was done of the top 20 most useless college majors.
She's got it right. She's got it right here.
And guess which was number 1?
Yes. Uh-huh. Where is it?
So, and one of the main reasons they said journalism was so useless, well, they had many different criteria, but among them they list things like salary, unemployment, whatever. But they were very limited in the scope of what the criteria that they included in this survey, this study. And I was just wondering, there's always been a debate whether if you want to be a journalist, should you major in journalism or major in something else, and then somehow acquire the skills through osmosis or something, I don't know. But
as,
What do you say
yes.
about journalism education as a whole?
Yes.
Should people major in journalism?
As you know, in Colorado, an entire journalism school has now gone away. You know, what the important thing about that study that you're referring to, and I apologize very much because I had it pulled up here and I am having issues and it's not going to
There's
come up.
another Wi-Fi network I turned on
Is-
for you.
Oh,
You want the half moon one.
okay, that's what it is. Oh, it says it's connected.
So just refresh and you'll see
Okay.
another.
Because it is a funny study, but the, refresh it.
Yeah, just click on top on the wireless connection. It'll say refresh network list.
Can you come around and do this for me?
Brad,
Because I don't
yeah.
know
Yes,
where you're
I'd be
referring
happy.
to. Thank you. I need technical assistance. I'm not that good at this.
Brad will do anything to get on his own camera.
But here's the thing about the study is that how did it measure useless? By money. By money. And I
Yeah.
would like for the first person in this room who got in this business to make a lot of money to stand up, please. I can tell you, when I got out of school with a master's degree from Northwestern, so I'd gotten a bachelor's and a master's degree, and along with it, an incredible student loan bill to pay for it, I went to work in Bristol, Virginia, and I earned minimum wage. And today, probably the equivalent is true for those getting out in the business. You're not getting in this business to make money. You just aren't. And that is the measure that was used. Here, I'll get out of the way. It'll also let me stand up, which is not much taller than me sitting down. But I find that to be, people who don't understand what we do put out studies like that. Because, as I said earlier, we do this because we know we make a difference. This is not a job, this is a calling. That is the reason that you're sitting in here, because you are reaching for something you feel will make a difference. And it will make a difference. Not every day, probably the fire of the day or the murder of the day will not be the story that will distinguish, but you will happen upon stories that will ignite you and therefore your community. And that's why you do it. I admire you. Please continue to teach and engage as many students as possible. I think journalism is not only viable, and successful. Right now, there are so many questions, and your students are saying to you, what am I going to do with this? The television stations aren't hiring, the newspapers aren't hiring, but you know what? They are hiring. They're hiring for web product. We're hiring people. My station has more employees than it did.